Hello, this is Christian. Welcome to Angular. In this video, let's take a look at the template-driven form validation in Angular. So here's the form that we're working on. We have two types, template-driven and reactive. They look very similar. So before I move on, I remember there's a typo in my code. I want to fix that first before we move on. In the template HTML, I have the minimum length here as a capital L for the word length, and that should be lowercase, okay? Because these are, these are actually just properties, so they should be lowercase. The uppercase is when used as a function in the reactive form group. Okay, so that should be good now. So you can see that all these inputs here, I have 3 of them, and they all have the minimum length of 2 each, and they all are required. Okay, so let's go and take a look at how these help us validate in the template. So here in the view, I'm going to go and press F12, and let's see some classes in here. So Angular has about, I think, 7 very useful classes that you can use to validate your form, to check for your form. And so in the element tag here, I'm going to focus just maybe on the one of those tags. Maybe take a look at 3 of them, but you can just focus on one. And so I don't really need this part over here anymore, just inside here. So we have the form tag, which is the parent tag, and you can see that the classes are added automatically by Angular. We did not add these in there. The one that we added were just basically in the input here. I add the form control for each of them, and that's it. So you see these classes called ng-untouched, ng-pristine, ng-invalid. And if you look at all of these, I think they all should be the same because I have not done anything to the form yet, and that's really important. So you can see that it matches the same status. If I make this a little bit smaller. Oh, well. Okay, maybe like that. Yeah, I just want to show those 3 matching. Okay, so these are the child or the components or controls inside the form. Whatever the state of these are, if one of them has an error, then that error is going to bubble up all the way to the top of the form, so the form will be changed to that condition. So in this case, this form here has never been touched. We haven't touched yet. I mean, touching outside here, you click around here, it's fine. When it says touched, meaning you actually click inside the form control or click a button somewhere, right? So right now nothing happened yet. So the status here you can see it says it has never been touched yet. It's pristine. Okay, pristine means the data has not been altered, and therefore it's invalid. It's invalid because we have requirements in this field, right? We have the minimum 2, and they are required for all of them. That's why it's invalid. So if that's the case, then usually you don't want to submit the form. When you submit it, you either show some messages, or you can also set the button here to be disabled so that it won't submit the form. And that's kind of common too by using these classes here. Okay, and so you see that if I go and put my mouse inside the name field, click inside, you can see my cursor is inside now blinking. Nothing happens here yet because it's still inside here. But now I touch the form. I touch one of the controls. So once I leave that field, if I click away, you see that it flashes on the screen, the center of your screen, and you see that the classes have been changed in this field. Only this one flashes and the form flashes, right? It's been changed from untouched, it was untouched before, like this, to touched now. And so therefore, you can say, oh, the form has been touched as well. But it's still pristine and it's still invalid. Okay, so let's change to pristine. The opposite of pristine is going to be dirty. Okay, the opposite of invalid is valid, and untouched was touched. So you have 6 of these different flags or classes, and there's one more class called pending. I don't think I used that before, but that's the 7th one. So there are about 7 very important classes that were used way back in Angular 1 or Angular JS, and they're still being used today. So now let's go inside the form again, and nothing happened because I touched that already. So if I click away, nothing happens to the same form field. If I go down here, if I move away, now that second field changed because now I touched it. So same thing. Okay, so now back to the name. If I go and type the letter A in there, okay, see it flashes again. This time we change from the pristine, like down here, to say dirty now. So therefore, the entire form is now also dirty. Okay, and it's still invalid because I haven't met the minimum requirements yet, and that is required. That's been met already because I have something there. I touched it, and the length is still less than 2, so that's why it's still invalid. So if I go and type another letter A, so you see that now this first field is valid, is dirty, and has been touched, but it's valid, so it's good to go. But the form is still invalid because these two fields again haven't met the requirements. So if I go and do the same thing for them, BB and CC, you see it flashes now. The form has been touched. It's now dirty, but it's valid. So therefore, you can go ahead and submit the form, right? So that's really important information to use to validate your form. And these are the classes that you can detect in each of these components or controls to trigger or display messages to the user. So let's go see how this is done in the code. So back in here, and so as you can see, all this validation occurs right on the template in the template-driven form. I don't have to go into the code at all. You'll see I'll do everything here in the template. Now, let me close this so you can have more space here. Now, notice that on the form tag, I have this pound sign with the F on it, right? So I mentioned earlier in the other video that signifies a very unique ID for this form. And this form is, in this case, bound to the ng form. So using the pound sign syntax, I can create very unique reference variables or reference ID or names to each of these fields. Just like how you do, in a regular ID field is equal to something like that, right? To make that a unique name. Okay, so each of these fields have a unique name, unique ID. You reference this ID in the CSS using the pound sign, right? So same logic here. So in Angular, using the template-driven form, you can create a variable like this locally here in this page or this template by using the same idea. So I would say, instead of this way, I'll use the pound sign and give it a name. And usually it's typical to have the same name as your field name here. Okay, you can call it whatever you want, doesn't matter, as long as it's unique in the entire document here. Oh, I kept saying entire because you could have multiple forms in this template, right? Form 1, form 2, and so on. So you need to make sure it's unique. If you don't, then you might have some expected results. So always make sure you have a unique name. And I can call it the same name, and then you have to bind this to the ng model. So ng model. Very similar to how you bind this to the ng form. Okay, so you bind this variable to the ng model. And so now I can use this variable name without the pound sign everywhere else in the code here to get its data, the value data. I can get all the class information, the name information, and all the other information like in this input, all those attributes. And I can treat this like a variable, like a name in the control, right, in the source. So that means, for example, if I want to display that information right over here, I could do this and type in name.value, and that will display the data from this value, whatever I type will display here. So if I save this, and if I go to the code, and let's see if that works. If I type in something, you see that it shows right here live, right? So I have this variable locally in the template alone. I did not touch the source code at all. It's just on the template. It's really, really useful and really powerful in this way because I can pass this data around if I want to. I could pass this information to another field and have to another form and have the data duplicated. Or a very common way is like you have a first name and last name. And you can use this to concatenate the first and last name to add to an empty field called full name, right? And so on. So using this idea, then I can check the validity of this input tag. So therefore I can say, okay, well, I can put a div tag in right below here, anywhere you want, but it's typical to put right here. And let me give it a class name. Alert is usually very common, alert dash danger, or you can create your own classes. That's up to you, CSS. And then also right in here, I'm going to put a span to display the actual message. So one of those messages would be, I need a minimum of 2 characters. So you can say minimum 2 characters. That's one message. Another message I might have is, I just say, name is required, because I have 2 of them, right? So now, okay, so to display this div tag and its information internally, I can check the names condition of these classes. So right here, or in the front, doesn't matter, I can put the ng field, ng directive, ng-if directive. I can check the name dot. As soon as I type dot, you see all these properties coming up. And you see that the errors, we'll talk about errors in a minute. And you have the invalid, right? Scroll down, we have the model, the name, all these properties, attributes can be accessed here. And the touch, untouched, and so on. So it's typical to say, okay, if the name is invalid, if that's the case, right? And also the name, if it's dirty, has been touched, or the name is now, dirty or touched, right? Is no longer pristine. It's been touched and it's now dirty. If that's the case, then go ahead and display this div tag. Okay, that's what it means. So if I save and go back to the view really quick, and if I refresh this page, all right, so now if I go and I touched it, I leave, you see that the error messages show up. It shows both of those messages because I did not filter those 2 yet. It says the minimum 2 characters required and name is required, right? So you want to show only one of each when you have those 2 that match. So if I go and typing, you see that when I meet those characters, it goes away. If I delete it, it comes back live. So it's a really, really nice feedback to your user. So let's go back and fix that error messages here. So when these are true, one of these is true, then I need to show only one of the other one. So I can say the same thing here. For the span tag, this part only show when the name dot errors has an error, and then has the error of length, minimum length. If that is triggered, then display this message. Now, it's also really important in this scenario, because if you remember in the view when we looked at it, maybe I'll show you in a separate time, is that this error can be null or undefined, or has this property. Okay, anytime we have that kind of scenario, it's possible that this might be undefined. If that's the case, then it's not going to have this min length. So therefore, when that happens, usually, again, it's JavaScript and TypeScript, right? So it's going to crash. So what you do is you use this question mark. This is a special operator called the safe operator used in TypeScript. And this will tell, or will say that, okay, if it's not null, or if it's not defined, then it should have this minimum length. Okay, if it's null or undefined, then just ignore it. Okay, so it doesn't crash your program. So it's always safe to put that. In this case, it's very common, but you can also write your own code anytime you have a variable that is possible, maybe null or not defined. Okay, so we're going to display that here, that message only, and I'm going to copy this and put it down here for the second one. This will be just required, right? So these are the same ones I add up here. So the minimum length, I check for that. If I have a maximum length, I have another one called max length. I have the required, so required is here, and so on. You can add some other additional one if you want. You can build your own custom one too, but we're not going to do that in this video. So now, if I save this and go back to the code, well, not this one. Okay, so let's refresh just in case. And I touch that. If I type leave, you see that now it's more accurate, right? It's required. I haven't had anything here. As soon as I type a letter, that changes to the 2 minimum characters. I need 2 of them. If I type 2 of them, then that's good. Now it's ready to go. right? And if I go back, that comes back live on the screen because now I touched it, it would never go away until I fix that. I mean, I can still move on to the next field and do my stuff, but this will always show up just to, alert you. You can do more than this just to make it like solid. You make a colorful box around it, highlight the make it under other background color and so on. Up to you. Okay, so that's good. Now, one last thing I want to show you is we can deactivate this add button here. So this should not be submitted, right? If it's invalid. And so you can do that by going to the code and just add one really simple one. If you remember the form, it's the parent form. That means because these two are not, any of these is not valid, then you just say do not submit the form. So you can basically disable this add button right here. I can just say here I can say ng-if again, if the form called f, right, f object is invalid. Okay, if it's invalid, then don't not ng-if, I'm sorry, not ng-if. If it's you just turn on off the disable attribute. You bind that to the attribute. If it's true, then disable it. So this is now not clickable. So if I go back and reload, you see that now it's not clickable. I can't click on it because it's now disabled. If I type in AA, it's still not disabled. These two are also required. If I type BB and CC, and there it is. It's now good to go. I could submit the form. If I go back and change one of these again, it becomes disabled again. So this is really, really good to make sure that every field is required or filled in correctly and properly before you submit the data. So that's how you do validation in the template-driven form in Angular.